Welcome, everyone. This is the third edition of the Tiny Lab Talks, and today we're going to talk about making users happy, why usability matters. Tiny Lab Talks are brief informal talks between researchers invited by the University of Aveiro and researchers from the University of Aveiro itself through the American Corner program on topics such as technologies, innovation, research, and culture. The conversations will usually take place at US American Corner MediaLab with the support of the US Embassy in Portugal. I want to give a warm welcome to both our guests today. Let me introduce you Santosh Basapur. He's a lecturer and planning coordinator for human factors and systems design at the Institute of Design in the Illinois Institute of Technology in Chicago. And he's also director of business for process design at Rush University Medical Center.
Thank you.
We also have Bernardo Cardoso. He's director of digital internet and TV at Altis Labs, and he's also a PhD student at University of Aveiro in the Information and Communication in Digital Platforms doctoral program. So to start with the topic of this tiny talk, I wanted to ask you, Santosh, if you could introduce us to the topic of usability and how it affects the user experience overall.
Usability is about all the things we use, right? It could be, we usually talk about it in the sense of digital interactions, but I like to come to it from the perspective of whatever we can do as designers to facilitate people's use of technology is usability. If you make it easy to use, great. If you make it fun to use, great. If you make use of technology, that is, to help somebody achieve an extremely complex task, that's still usability. It may, on the superficial view of it, it may not look easy to use, but if somebody is getting the task that is now getting done just because technology could facilitate it, we did our job as designers of interactions. So good interaction design to enable people to use technology in their everyday life is what I would describe as usability.
Okay. So Bernard, from your perspective of digital products, how do you find the evolution from usability to a more broader sense of the term user experience? How does that have evolved into the digital world?
It's just, again, like Santosh said, it's not just the digital world. It happens also on the physical world, even with digital devices. Because one concept of the user experience is, for instance, brand. And you can see the brand awareness you have in iPhone. And it's a digital device, but it's the same device with the Apple brand and without the Apple brand, the precisely same device, everything equal, will have a different user experience. Because the user experience is also what the user experience from the usage of the device or the digital platform. It encompasses everything. And starts even before you even saw the device, because as Professor Santosh showed yesterday, and it's also part of my PhD research, the user experience starts in the moment you, as a user, listen something describing the concept or the product. You start having expectations about what the device or the product or the service is. And this is an expected user experience. And then you have the first encounter with the device, and that is the instantaneous user experience. Mm-hmm. Then the episodic user experience, when you use the device and then stops using and then restarts using. And after some time, you have a full-length user experience, the overall, the cumulative user experience. Mm-hmm. You have all of these different user experience, both with digital devices, with devices from the day-to-day, your shoes, your glasses, everything of that belongs to the user experience.
Mm-hmm. So both of you come from a research and a corporate side of, so you have both sides of that experience.
Yes.
But Santosh, you've worked through several projects and several products along the years. Can you take us through the process of user research and user testing in order to work towards a better user experience in the end? So how would the process happen?
Yeah, so I would say there would be roughly like 6 or 7 steps in a development of a good innovative product. You want me to walk you through those quickly, high level?
Yeah, quickly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll talk a little bit high level, so bear with me. First is usually we call it, this is actually well-written process by Professor Vijay Kumar of Institute of Design in his book, Design Methods, 101 Design Methods for Innovation. One of the first things I teach my students is, how do you build a context around the problem that you're trying to solve? And building context is extremely important because that actually frames the problem in depth. Like, for example, if you want to innovate about saying, my students at ID usually have a problem with scheduling because they're always late for everything. Sorry, guys. So what we try to do is then in one of the projects, I said, let's innovate for that. So first step is understand the context of why we are late. What happens the previous night that we cannot wake up the next day. So I'm talking that level of building context of the user, their situation, what everybody else has researched about that topic. So that kind of helps you find the problem, because a famous philosopher and like a researcher, John Carroll, has said that if you solve the wrong problem, there's nothing worse than that in design. Because you may have an elegant, amazing solution, but if you're addressing the wrong problem, you're messed up, right? So finding context and building understanding of that context is a major step of the process. Then we do user research, which is we go try to understand people, their habits, the technologies they use, or the things that they're trying to do that current technology does not do. So we pay a lot of attention to unmet needs of people. From there is when we start saying, okay, if we learn this about this user in this context, what can we now invent so that to make their life easier? So that's how we then come to the intervention part, and we start ideating about what are the different small ideas that come to mind immediately. How can we then integrate those ideas and build bigger solutions that can address as much of the needs as we can without disrupting other things that they're doing? Then we prototype it. And prototyping is extremely important because I say, like, fail often, fail early, so that in the long run you will win. So that's the secret mantra of going from understanding context all the way to inventing, all the way to prototyping. And then because you have been user-centered from the beginning till the end, the product definitely will meet the needs of people. If not all, at least as many as you can build from the research you did. So understanding problem, researching, synthesizing solutions, and prototyping would be the big steps I would lay out for a design of new technology.
In an iterative process,
And
obviously.
a very iterative process. Very
we always
iterative
go
process.
back and
Yep.
we always iterate.
I hope you saw that in my talk yesterday. I put like a human-centered designs, latest international standard organizations map. It's a complete circle. You keep repeating it till you're happy with the idea, and then you ship it out.
Okay, so from that, when do the design work stop? So when are we done with our work in the iterative
Now, that's
process?
a very deep philosophical question. I would say everything is a prototype. You never stop. It's like building and understanding context. When do you build a context and when do you stop? You never stop. Because as a researcher, as a designer, you're always reading, you're always researching, you're always trying to understand human behavior. So similarly in design, you're always going to keep designing that product. It's never going to be like iPhone 1.0 was the last, right? There will always be iPhone 2.0. We're now iOS, 10.0? 12. So that never stops, because getting better understanding of technology and building the next better technology is always going to be our endeavor in interaction design. So it's always going to be non-stop. So every product, even if you feel it's final at this point of time when you deliver it, it's just a prototype of the next one that's coming down the line.
So in that sense, we're approaching new ways of new behaviors, new interaction methods. We're getting into voice interaction, we're getting into even using our gestures and such. So what challenges do you both, maybe start with Bernardo, do you anticipate for the next research?
The new kind of interaction, voice we are working, and also gestures. The voice, as we talked yesterday, is actually a solution looking for a problem. Or there's a small mismatch, but this small is huge right now between what you can do, and as you know, we can do a lot, and what user expects we can do, and as you understand also, is a lot, and these are right now completely different worlds between what we can do and what the user wants us to do. And as Professor Santos said yesterday, and I agree, there's still a big mismatch. And I think right now we need to actually address some of the really useful use case. The one use case we can open the mind of the person. Oh, okay, I now know from here to where I can go. And as you know, we started our research with searching for movies and series, because it's the application of voice to the media stuff. And in the first public demos, everyone asked about soccer. So when does my team play? What the games are online this weekend? So even there, with something we could build, we could start with soccer instead of movies and series. And we had this mismatch with the user. And in this case, it's not actually the user context, but is what the user really wants. Because when you ask, you know, they will say something, and when you actually observe them doing something, they do something completely different. So, as you know, if you ask everyone likes cinema and big series, but if you go to the data, you understand that they look reality shows, soap operas, and soccer, more or less that. For the interaction, the gestures, I actually yesterday was enlightenment, because we did a lot of gestures in the past, both with Kinect, and now we have a smart mirror with electrofield detection. But as Professor Santos described, there is mismatch between direct interaction, manipulation, and indirect manipulation. And when you are in direct manipulation, like you are with the mouse, and you see the pointer, it's not that direct, but you know that if you go with the mouse up, the pointer will go, you see the pointer. Or in the Wiimote on the Wii console, you move something in the air, but there is a small cartoonish hand on the screen to actually tell you where you are moving. Some of these new gestures like stuff, you don't see anything. So I tried to use a lip motion in the past. It's quite difficult because you don't even know where you are starting moving. And I think we need to devise new ways to actually convert this indirect manipulation that only happens on your mind to some kind of direct manipulation that you can materialize and make the system useful in the interaction, like when you touch or like when you move a mouse and you see the mouse pointer.
Okay. Is there anything you want to add? What do you predict for the future, for the next few years at least?
So instead of thinking like graphical user interface, voice user interface, tactile user interface, instead of trying to classify these in different modalities of interaction, I think we as all designers of interaction and all researchers in usability, all practitioners in usability, will benefit a lot if we move our mind out of modalities and think of what comes most naturally to people and how can we design it along that line of thought so that it is a natural user interface to be using. Like it should come intuitively. If I reach out to something, I should be able to hold it, right? If I take a breath, I should be able to like smell it. It's like, how can you achieve that naturalness around interacting with technology that literally the UI should disappear? Like there shouldn't be an interface. If you're a really good interface designer, there shouldn't be an interface. Get there, and now we have usability going. So for example, we were talking one day about cars. I was like, what's the one thing that attracts the most about cars, and what will happen if it disappears? My students were like, now we get it. And I was like, what is it that you got? The answer they gave was perfect, which is new car smell is about the car, right? It's not about the interface. I've not turned the car on. Nothing has happened yet. I opened the door. I sat in the chair of the car. I smelled the new car smell. And that's like $1 million, right? So imagine a car without the new car smell. You paid thousands of dollars and you got into the car and it doesn't smell new. Like, that's the disappointment I'm talking about when we're not using natural medium of experiencing something. So the smells, the taste, we're not exploring that aspect to make something natural. So I would say instead of thinking voice, gesture, tactile, haptic, all that, forget all that, go into direct manipulation, go into understanding what that interaction should be like. And then if that technology is missing, invent it. And if that interaction is missing, design it. Like let's go for natural user interfaces.
The best interface
Exactly.
is no
That
interface.
would be the idea,
Yeah.
right? Best interfaces, zero click, zero touch, but you get what you want to get doing, but doesn't always get there. But maybe we do need the touch where the touch should be there. So it's not about guessing what the user wants, it's about getting the user to where they want to go without them having to think too much about it.
That would be ideal.
Exactly. The dream world, one can dream.
Exactly. So we can open the floor to questions. So if there's anyone in the audience that wants to make a question.
Please.
Go ahead.
Hi, Sanj. Thank you for the
Thank you.
contributions. I agree that we are always on the move, always
Yes.
with a prototype in our minds. And I think that we already know a lot about the user.
Sure,
But
yes.
I think we don't know enough about what happens between 2 or 3 users. So what about deepening knowledge on specific use cases on interaction and communication between users and not only a user?
Absolutely.
Especially to better understand what happens in terms of empathy and social influence,
Mm-hmm.
and how those two concepts can help us to design experiences that can put different users communicating in interaction with devices differently.
Nice.
So how do you see the future if we look at interfaces as a way to communicate and to better help social interaction and social influence and empathy using digital devices?
Mm-hmm. Okay, how many hours we have? No, that's an extremely good question and very, very deep. So one of the ways I start teaching interaction design, believe it or not, my first slide goes, I have 2 cartoon characters of 2 kids, small kids on the screen, and I put it up on the screen and I say, what are they doing? Like I ask my class, right, what are they doing? And the class goes, they're playing. So they don't have to do any research, they don't have to do anything. They see 2 kids standing next to each other, they assume that they are playing. They don't say that they're arguing, they don't say that they're like hitting each other or anything, they're just playing. So that's the empathy, right? Like it doesn't take much, it's just look at it and you get it. So even natural user interfaces are like that. If you look at an object, you get it. If you were looking at that other person through the medium of technology, if you can get it, that phrase works, then we are into that space of empathizing with the other person. There's not much interaction yet, there's not much speech yet, there's not much anything yet. So similarly, like the technology has to be the intermediator, like we call it as the boundary objects, right? So we get into that space of technical language now, sorry.
Yes, but bound is a very important concept.
Exactly, so it's so important that I cannot avoid using it.
Especially now, which is
In
topic
health.
that I
health is actually very specialized case, and it's very important there, but I would say in everyday life it's important. Because then the next slide I put up is two small kids, same kids, I've spread them out, and I put a skipping rope in the middle. And I asked them, what's going on now? They're like, oh, they're playing. But guess what? In the first one, there was no skipping rope. They said they were playing already. So now I asked them this. Immediately they escalated. My students say, oh, they're skipping, but they're enjoying. There's joy now in that interaction, and it's being mediated by that small object of skipping rope. So we are basically trying to build empathy between people through technology. That can be one of the principles and aims of our design. But will it exactly happen the way we want to? We don't know. So I think it's up to a lot of experimentation and prototyping to introduce these objects of design in the arena of two people using something to do something, and then keep an eye out for whether that empathy is being built or that empathy is not being built, and then put prototype towards the improvement of that. One of the examples I can give from my experience is I was part of a project where I was doing the user research side of allowing older generations to keep a story at a physical location of a city and leave it there. They don't do anything, there's not much interaction. So they video record their story about that location and what happened at some point in the past. And then they drop the story at a GSM, like a geographical location. And if their relative or their kid or their grandkid or their nephew or niece happens to pass by, if they come within 1 mile of that story, their phone will pop up that story and they're able to experience it. So we thought it was a great idea, embedded design of like experience, and we thought geographically located media would be amazing. We can put ads on it, make money, blah, 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 right? But then the best part was we saw a serious spike in communication between relatives, which was not before they experienced that story. So it was not just the technology, not about the experiencing of the story in the location, but that trigger yielded a ton of communication between relatives, which was not happening before. So we ended up going from location-based stories and experiences to realizing that we enabled an empathy and increased connectedness between family members who had lost that connectedness over time and over location. And that was a great feeling. So we went into intergenerational enablement of communication than location-based advertising or media experience. So that's where something will be good.
My question was not only about the way that we can help to create new ideas and new interfaces and new devices to help that communication, but also how can we study and evaluate in our early stages of the development process, not only the user itself, but also the interactions between the users. Because sometimes the interfaces that we are designing are not attracting people, they are putting people away. So we need to understand how can we measure the interactions and the communications that users need to establish when using our interfaces, and probably our instruments and our methods that we use nowadays to measure desires of the users and usability and user experience are still focused on the user and not on the interactions and not on the communication, and with a special, for me, emphasis on the empathy and social influence concepts.
So
we don't have methods yet for that.
So that's where I say go with the first principles, right? Our first principles would be like start from scratch, saying what is our need and then what are the measurement tools out there. So recently, because I've been working a lot in healthcare, I realized something similar, that we're missing these tools. And I realized that a lot of these tools are already being done in social sciences of healthcare. So we can start, interaction design is a science of borrowed theories, right? So we have to agree to that. We've always been borrowing, we've always been adapting those theories into it. Exactly. So if you, especially, I was coming to nursing, because nursing people have done tons of research and developed very sophisticated instruments for understanding how somebody feels, whether they feel that they are improved over time, whether they have been like losing out confidence over time. So it's all about understanding what our need is to measure from our interaction design point of view, and then begging and borrowing and stealing from the nearby fields of nursing. Multidisciplinarity, or actually one of the famous MIT Media Lab people, Professor Asker, said, think of even anti-disciplinarity. Like, you may hate the instruments you have now, so you may have to go against your own discipline and antagonistically borrow something from people we hate or something we don't like, but still it's useful because that's what answers a question in research. So think of multidisciplinarity, or as the famous word goes, anti-disciplinarity, to beg, borrow, and steal from nearby fields. But in healthcare, I'm borrowing heavily right now. I'm doing an app where we are trying to help people take care of premature babies. So these are babies which have been born way ahead of time and the parents are feeling helpless. So we are working towards how do you make people feel confident by helping them through the journey that's really, really tough. And I can't go and ask a mother, like, how do you feel about your baby being that sick? That's just not done, right? That's not the way to do ethical user research. So we are exploring tons of different tools, and they're all from premature baby research from the completely from done by the health researchers, nothing to do with interaction designers. But we are borrowing heavily from that field to use here. So I would say measurement that's the idea, beg, borrow, or steal.
Any other questions? Emotions, human emotions are a tricky subject.
Yes, very tricky.
Especially for designers.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned we can think of technology more of a beyond media. Sorry, not that the entertainment piece is not important, but how do you feel about technology entering our lives? How much value does it add? Just as a final question, what can innovation and technology bring to the table in terms of value, not only just in entertainment, but in healthcare?
Everything I can think of, right? Like, that's what drives me every day to my work and drives me to spend more than 20 hours a day to do this work is we have everything to achieve yet. We have only addressed all the low-hanging fruit in terms of interaction design. We are trying to master media experiences. We are trying to master, like, look at all your apps on any of your iPhone or Android devices. They're still extremely primitive in my sense of understanding. It's like we're still in scheduling problems. We're still in to-do lists. How do I get my work done? How can you motivate me to get my work done? That entire motivation is missing. How about healthcare? So I'm in this weird mix of research where on one end of the spectrum, I'm trying to help parents of premature babies, right? That's not entertaining. That's life and death matter. I cannot tell you how I feel when midway through my study, I'm told you cannot interview those parents anymore. And if I make the mistake of asking why, I cringe upon the answer I get because the baby expired. So it's like, you just lost a study subject, the way we talk about in interaction design. Not because they were not motivated to participate, not because they were lazy, because usually that happens in our other experience design. And like if you're studying for TV behaviors, people just drop off the study, right? But here they dropped off because the subject of the matter is gone. So then suddenly you're like, oh, I really need to know now how to do this without having to do that interview, or without having to do, or doing an interview in such a natural way that it doesn't intrude on their personal situation that they are in right now. On the other end of the spectrum, I'm trying to design interventions for people who are in ICU, senior adults who are at the end of the life care. So now how do you design something for end of life care with similar problems? So the caregiver is tired and burnt out. They don't want to be interviewing you about what they want from technology. They don't want to be explaining. So I would say there's a huge future where natural user interfaces will answer our questions, where cities will be smart, the infrastructures will be smart. So we will have to become smarter in saying, what are the necessities of life? Media is an extremely essential thing, but still we are right now into, what did Mr. Hastings, the CEO of Netflix, say? He said that my major problem is people sleep. Sleep is his competitor, not anybody else. It's not Amazon, it's not Google stealing his eyeballs. My competitor is sleep. People sleep and I want them to watch more TV. We've got to go beyond that. We've got to be able to say, how can we have enriched lives with media as a principal piece of it, healthcare as a principal piece of it, yet design for something that helps us achieve those goals in a very, technology will play a humongous role in all this, because without that we cannot enable any of this, what I'm saying. And designing interaction will be another big wave of work coming towards us, right? the moment the technology changes to achieve these complex goals, our role will become more important and more complex. So we'll have to invent new tools, beg, borrow, and steal from neighboring fields, get better at prototyping these unknown prototypes that we have zero idea about, and then put it out in the field and be ready to fall flat on your face and realize what you did was completely wrong, and get up, brush off the dust, and work again. Because prototyping and doing this research is gonna be there for the time I can see. I hope I'm prototyping till the end.
I think we're all ready to fail
Exactly.
several times until.
Fail early, fail often, then you'll succeed in the end. Or hopefully you'll have at least some sense of success in the end.
Okay. So I think that's all the time we have.
Thank you so much.
But-
Sorry I overspoke.
No. I want to mention that Professor Santosh also gave a really great talk yesterday, and it's also available online on the same YouTube channel, so you can watch it there.
Thank you so much. Really
It was
enjoyed
really
Aveiro.
nice. I want to thank you both for participating.
so
I also want to thank the support of the U.S. Embassy in Lisbon, the American Corner at UA. And I also want to thank Professor Jorge Ferraz, Professor Pedro Almeida, all the University of Aveiro team for making this happen. And so the next Tiny Talk will happen soon, so stay tuned to the social media channels to attend the next talk. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good job.